From the lumber mills of North Carolina to the bright lights of Nashville, Charlie Daniels forged a path no one saw coming. Ever wonder how a self-taught teenager turned a fiery fiddle into one of country's biggest crossover hits? Stick around, because we're digging into the heart and soul of the man behind "The Devil Went Down to Georgia." His raw ambition, epic stage presence, and the personal battles that shaped his unstoppable rise. Charlie Daniels grew up believing that music could mend the deepest cracks in a person's life. When he was a boy, he watched his parents struggle under the weight of tough blue-collar labor in rural North Carolina. And he learned early on that every paycheck came with sweat and calloused hands. He was born on October 28, 1936, to William and LaRue Daniels, both proud, hard-working people who never sugar-coated the challenges of survival in America's rural South. Long before he'd ever dream of gold records or sell-out crowds, Charlie discovered the humbling power of manual work, lugging lumber, hammering nails, inhaling the thick scent of cut pine, and realized the world wouldn't do him any favors unless he earned them. But in the midst of all that sweat and wood dust, there was this fiery little spark of something else: music. If he wasn't hearing the vibrant call and response harmonies of a Pentecostal church service, he was picking up bits of old-timey bluegrass from itinerant pickers who drifted through town. And every once in a while, when the radio reception was just right, he'd catch a broadcast of Elvis Presley that electrified him in ways he didn't fully understand. He was barely 15 when he decided to buy his first guitar, an impulsive choice that cost him precious wages from the lumber mill, but one that changed his life forever. He taught himself the basics by ear, hunched over in his small room, determined to make those steel strings sing out the gospel tunes he'd heard in church, the rollicking rockabilly of Elvis and the swirling influences of the Appalachian Hills. He quickly developed a taste for the rowdy rhythms of early rock and roll and the heartbreaking twang of country ballads. It was all good to him, just as long as the music spoke truth. Many times, Charlie would recall how losing his Uncle James to pneumonia in 1948 had left him reeling, and how from that point forward, he poured himself into every note he played. By 1959, the teenage Daniels felt sure that music could carry him far beyond the lumber mill. Along with some local buddies, he formed a group called the Jaguars. They weren't polished, and they sure weren't big time, but they had enough grit and enthusiasm to fill any bar on the North Carolina circuit. Charlie was the band's de facto leader, a multi-instrumentalist who shifted from guitar to fiddle with barely a breath in between. On slow nights, they'd play half-finished songs of their own or jam on the rockabilly hits that had begun to define America's new youth culture. Between sets, Charlie would crack jokes, sip a Coke or a cheap beer, and listen to the chatter of bartenders and patrons. It was a far cry from any grand stage, but in those smoky clubs, he refined his ability to connect with an audience on a personal level, something that would later become the core of his career. Yet playing in local bars wasn't enough. In 1967, just as the nation was exploding with the sound of the British invasion and the radical transformations of folk rock, Charlie packed up what few things he had and moved to Nashville, the fabled capital of country music. Most aspiring pickers and singers arrived in Nashville bright-eyed and hopeful, only to discover how harsh and competitive the city really was. But Charlie had one crucial edge: versatility. He could play guitar, bass, fiddle, even mandolin when pressed, and he wasn't above doing session work in cramped studios for meager pay if it meant getting his foot in the door. Before long, his confidence, coupled with a deep repertoire of gospel, bluegrass, country, and rock, caught the attention of producers who needed someone to hold down a bass line or add a rustic fiddle flourish to an almost finished track. That was how he ended up on Bob Dylan's Nashville skyline in 1969, laying down bass lines that anchored Dylan's folksy vision. He also contributed to albums by Leonard Cohen and Pete Seeger, rubbing shoulders with icons he'd once only read about in magazines. Charlie was good at blending in, but he also had an undeniable spark that made people remember him. He'd light up a session with an offhand joke or a short, blistering solo that made everyone in the room raise their eyebrows. The more he played, the more his phone rang. Still, session work alone wasn't the dream. Even though being a sideman to legends felt surreal at times, Charlie knew he had his own stories to tell. Around 1970, Capitol Records took a chance on him, intrigued by his raw energy and ability to fuse country with the edgier feel of Southern rock. His first single, Uneasy Rider, released in 1973, managed to hit number 1, 9 on the pop charts, an impressive feat for a country rock track that wasn't exactly standard radio fare. It was a satirical piece, half-talking blues, half-comic storyline, and it announced to the world that Charlie Daniels was a different breed of country musician. He wasn't a rhinestone cowboy crooning about heartbreak. He was more likely to spin a story about a chaotic road trip or a gritty bar fight, all layered over foot-stomping riffs. Audiences, hungry for a fresh sound, latched onto this track, and it propelled Charlie to broaden his ambitions. In 1971, he formed what would become the legendary Charlie Daniels Band, often abbreviated as the CDB. The group refined the mix of Southern rock, country, and bluegrass that bubbled inside Charlie's imagination. They hopped labels, going from Kama Sutra to Epic Records, always looking for the right fit. By the late 1970s, they'd struck gold. Their album, Million Mile Reflections, released in 1979, soared to platinum status, driven in no small part by the single that would define Charlie's entire career. The Devil Went Down to Georgia. That song, part blistering fiddle showdown, part tall tale about a battle of wits against Satan himself, became an instant classic. It climbed to number 1 on the country chart and number 3 on the pop chart, crossing genre boundaries with astonishing ease. The track ended up selling over 2 million copies, snagging a Grammy for Best Country Vocal Performance in 1979 and being named CMA Single of the Year. From then on, Charlie Daniels was no longer just a session player or a promising upstart. He was a bona fide star. The Charlie Daniels Band went on to score 5 number 1 hits. 1 hits on the country charts, including Drinkin' My Baby Goodbye in 1986 and Boogie Woogie Fiddle Country Blues in 1988. Their blend of styles, rock intensity, country storytelling, bluegrass virtuosity, kept fans on their toes. The band's lineup changed occasionally, but Charlie remained the centerpiece with his long hair, trademark cowboy hat, and unstoppable fiddle riffs that seemed to channel the restless spirit of Southern music itself. If there was one event that symbolized the joyous chaos of Charlie's musical vision, it was the Volunteer Jam. He launched this annual Nashville concert in 1974, originally not intending it to become a tradition, but it immediately caught fire. The first jam featured the Marshall Tucker Band and drew over 15,000 fans, setting the tone for what became a decades-long phenomenon. Year after year, Volunteer Jam brought together rockers, country crooners, and just about anyone else who could keep a crowd on its feet. Leonard Skynyrd, Alabama, and countless other big names would show up, jamming well past midnight in a sweaty, electrified celebration of music. The event's blend of rock and country, its rowdy sense of community, and its unabashed embrace of fun captured Charlie's spirit perfectly. By the 2010s, Volunteer Jam was an institution, still drawing big crowds and continuing to link new generations of fans to the freewheeling vibe Charlie had cultivated decades before. While he was redefining Southern rock on stage, Charlie also dipped his boots into television. He appeared on Hee Haw, The Mike Douglas Show, and even snagged a cameo in the film Urban Cowboy, 1980. In that movie's soundtrack, the Charlie Daniels Band contributed Falling in Love for the Night, helping push the entire album to the number one spot on the country charts. Everywhere you turned in the late 70s and 80s, from primetime TV to local radio, you could find traces of Charlie Daniels. He was like a constant soundtrack to the era's rebellious streak, a reminder that country music could still be wild, unpredictable, and fun. By the 1990s, Charlie's career had already spanned 4 decades, a feat that would break lesser artists. But his momentum didn't slow. Though the music industry had shifted with new pop country acts dominating radio, Charlie leaned into his core values: patriotism, faith, and a relentless work ethic. In 1993, he released America, I Believe in You, a patriotic album that showcased his pride in the red, white, and blue. Several of its tracks spoke to the heartland, resonating with fans who appreciated his no-nonsense approach to life and country. And though his singles weren't always topping the charts anymore, 1989's Simple Man managed to hit number 1, 12, reminding everyone that Charlie Daniels still had something vital to say. He shifted gears again in 1994 with The Door, an album that reflected his deepening Christian faith. This record earned him a Dove Award in 1995, a recognition typically reserved for top-tier gospel performers. Faith had always played a role in Charlie's music. The blend of Pentecostal fire and Southern grit shaped his worldview. But this album signaled a more explicit embrace of spiritual themes. Fans who had discovered him through raucous anthems like Devil Went Down to Georgia got a glimpse of the introspective side of the man, the same kid who once listened to gospel voices in a tiny North Carolina church. His final album, Nighthawk, came in 2016, hitting number 1, 34 on the country charts, a respectable showing for a man pushing 80. Critics noted that the record bore the marks of a lifetime spent honing his craft. It was reflective, occasionally defiant, and always drenched in that unmistakable fiddle that seemed to laugh and weep all at once. By then, Charlie had sold over 13 million records, earned 37 charted singles, and scored 5 number 1 singles. 1 hit. In 2016, he was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, a milestone that recognized not just his personal achievements, but also his role in shaping the entire Southern rock and country genre. As of 2025, Charlie Daniels' Devil Went Down to Georgia remains a streaming juggernaut, blasting from car radios, bar jukeboxes, and dusty Spotify playlists across America. A 2024 PBS documentary titled Charlie Daniels' Fiddle Fire continues to stoke the flames of his legacy, detailing the ins and outs of his volunteer jam, which the CDB has revived for a new generation of fans. But behind all those accolades and bright lights, there was a man shaped by equally powerful personal stories. Charlie Daniels was, at heart, a family man, though he came from a lineage that knew more about survival than stability. Born in 1936, he spent his childhood moving across North Carolina as his father sought steady work wherever it cropped up. They passed through small towns and rural enclaves where the Pentecostal church was often the central gathering spot. Charlie's earliest musical experiences involved those ecstatic Sunday sessions, where voices rose in fervent praise. By 15, he had left school to work in lumber mills, a harsh reality that gave him a sobering view of how precarious life could be. Yet from that precariousness emerged a fierce determination. In a 1980 Rolling Stone interview, he was quoted saying, "Sweat and strings built my dreams," summarizing his belief that hard labor and heartfelt music were both essential to his soul. In 1963, destiny introduced him to Hazel Juanita Alexander at a club in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She was sharp, quick-witted, and immune to the flimsy lines thrown around by bar patrons. Charlie was smitten. A year later, on September 20th, 1964, they were married. That union became a solid foundation in the whirlwind life that Charlie was about to step into. Hazel co-managed his career, offered candid feedback on his music, and traveled with him whenever possible. In a business riddled with temptations and the chaos of the road, having Hazel's steady presence helped Charlie remain grounded. They had one son, Charlie Jr., born in 1965, who eventually took over managing the Charlie Daniels Band's business affairs. The family settled in Mount Juliet, Tennessee in the 1970s, transforming a slice of land there into a personal sanctuary. Hazel and Charlie stayed together for 56 years until his death, a rarity in an industry known for quick, tumultuous marriages. Interviews with close friends of the couple always emphasized their warm partnership. Hazel's calm approach balanced Charlie's boisterous personality. Charlie Jr. grew up surrounded by his father's bandmates and equipment cases. Even as a kid, he understood that his father was doing something extraordinary, bringing people together through music that was equal parts roadhouse and revival meeting. Over time, Charlie Jr. grew into a leadership role within the family business, eventually helping oversee the Charlie Daniels Journey Home Project, an organization formed to support veterans, reflecting Charlie's deep reverence for those who served their country. Like many public figures who live life at full throttle, Charlie faced serious health challenges. In 1980, while clearing land on his property with a chainsaw, he suffered a freak accident that severed 3 of his fingers. Rushed to the hospital, he underwent painstaking surgery to have them reattached. Though doctors warned him to take it easy, Charlie was back to fiddling in a matter of months. This resilience became part of his legend. A People magazine story from 1981 called it sheer stubbornness, while Charlie just shrugged and said he had shows to play. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2001, and once again, he returned to the stage after treatment with minimal downtime. In 2010, he had a mild stroke while on a ski trip in Colorado, another potential career ender that failed to keep him sidelined for long. Each time adversity hit, Charlie's response was the same: "The good Lord isn't done with me yet." As the decades rolled on, fans took comfort in that unwavering presence. It seemed like Charlie Daniels would always be there, bowing his fiddle, tipping his hat, and launching into "The Devil Went Down to Georgia" with the same gusto he had shown back in 1979. But life inevitably moves forward. On July 6, 2020, Charlie passed away at the age of 83 from a hemorrhagic stroke at Summit Medical Center in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Hazel and Charlie Jr. were by his side, lending what comfort they could. The news sent shockwaves through the music world. Artists from Dolly Parton to Ted Nugent took to social media to share their grief and gratitude for what Charlie had contributed to American music. The Grand Ole Opry planned a tribute that included performances by Vince Gill and Trace Adkins, culminating in a powerful rendition of "Devil Went Down to Georgia" by the Charlie Daniels Band. Charlie was cremated, and his family scattered his ashes on his beloved Twin Pines Ranch, a place that had given him solace and joy in his later years. The Opry Memorial was filled with tears, laughter, and fiddles sounding out in a communal cry of grief and celebration. Hazel would pass away 2 years later, in 2022, joining her husband in spirit, but not before she took part in ensuring Charlie's philanthropic efforts lived on. Charlie Jr., now responsible for the family's legacy, continued the Journey Home project, which by 2025 had raised over $15 million to aid veterans in need. And on the ranch itself, retreats for veterans became a tradition, quiet, healing spaces that gave back in the spirit Charlie cherished. As time marched on, Charlie's influence remained. In 2024, the public got another in-depth look at his life through the PBS documentary Charlie Daniels, Fiddle, which balanced the rowdy escapades of volunteer jam with the tender family moments that shaped his heart. Archival footage showed him jamming with old friends, speaking openly about his faith, and recalling the memories of that uneasy writer session that first put him on the national radar. Younger fans who knew him only as the legendary fiddler from classic rock radio discovered the deeper well of experiences that formed the man behind the music. In 2025, the Charlie Daniels Band still tours, fronted by an arrangement of seasoned musicians who uphold Charlie's standards for a high-octane live show. There's always a moment in every concert when they launch into long-haired country boy, and for a split second, it's like Charlie's presence is there, rowdy, proud, and defiantly unrefined. The band also remains active on social media, sharing old photos and behind-the-scenes anecdotes, especially about the volunteer jam. Fans respond with stories of how they first heard Devil Went Down to Georgia at a county fair, or how they slow danced to a quieter Charlie Daniels tune on a warm summer night. But beyond the music, the man left a legacy of resilience and generosity that resonates just as powerfully as his biggest hits. The Journey Home Project, founded in 2014 by Charlie and Hazel, has provided significant resources for veterans re-entering civilian life. Its expansions, made possible by donations and volunteer work, ranged from building transitional housing to funding medical support for PTSD treatments. In the spirit of Charlie's unwavering patriotism, the organization stands as a living tribute to what he believed in, uplifting those who served their country, offering them second chances, and telling them, in essence, that they are not forgotten. Charlie's story wasn't just about chart positions or record sales, though with over 13 million records sold and multiple platinum albums, he had plenty of those credentials. It was about forging a path that stayed true to his own vision of what music could be, a rambunctious blend of country twang, rock rebellion, and heartfelt storytelling. His discography serves as a roadmap of a changing America, from the rebellious haze of the 1970s to the socially conscious anthems of the 1990s and 2000s. Even his more controversial patriotic songs reflected a deep conviction that America could be better if people worked hard, stuck to their roots, and cared for one another. In many ways, Charlie Daniels embodied the idea of the working-class hero, someone who never forgot where he came from, who valued the sweat on his brow and the callus on his hand. Even when he stood on the stage at the Grand Ole Opry in a crisp Western suit, the memory of those North Carolina lumber mills wasn't far behind. He joined the Opry in 2008, a crowning honor for any country artist, and stood on that storied circle with the same sense of wonder and gratitude he had when he first walked into a Nashville studio decades before. For all the talk about his big personality and bigger sound, Charlie Daniels could be surprisingly introspective. Friends recall quiet moments after a show, where he'd sit on the tour bus, reading the Bible or strumming a guitar in near silence, letting the adrenaline of the performance settle. He often repeated that his success wasn't solely his doing. He felt it was guided by providence, shaped by the love of his wife, and sustained by the fans who stuck with him through thick and thin. For someone who played hundreds of shows a year at his peak, the energy never flagged, because he viewed each performance as another chance to share joy, to invite the audience into a communal space of music, laughter, and maybe a little mischief. Thanks for tuning in and exploring the remarkable life of Charlie Daniels with me. If his story inspired you, or if you just love a scorching fiddle solo, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the legends who change music forever. Keep that rebel spirit alive, and I'll see you in the next video.